Hey, meteorologist James Wieland here, your surfing weatherman, and we're ready to talk about some surf for this week and look at some of the weather maps. We're going to analyze them, let you know when the swell is going to hit, and welcome to the impact zone. Here we go. First, there are some waves in the forecast for the early part of the week, so that's good. Nothing real big, but there is something there. Longer range looks good for us too. And then we're going to go into, well, the winter forecast. I'm going to give you a little dabble into that and let you know kind of what's going to go on, what I think is going to go on for the winter, and how that's going to measure up to previous winters swell-wise. So let's get on it. First, right now, also, we have Rip Curl Pro in France. So hopefully you're watching that. Slater's still in it. We'll have to see what happens tomorrow. I think the forecast for there is about the same tomorrow. So it does look like they'll probably run it tomorrow. The women are finished. The men will take over now, and they will probably run it tomorrow. Now, for us, it starts at like 2 a.m., so it's a tough one to get up and watch. When you get up in the morning, it's already going on, so I just wait for the heat recap later on in the evening. All right, so let's look at some weather maps and see what's going on here, and we'll get rid of my mug. There we go. And first, this is what we were looking at. It's very weak right now. This was the fetch that kind of created some waves out there the past couple of days. Very small, though. It's been bigger up coast, about waist high, some chest high. I got some reports of chest highs up into central Florida here. But I do think this is kind of winding itself down here. The thing is, with tomorrow, Monday, the wind is going to be lightening up. So along the coast, it will turn much cleaner than the choppiness that's kind of been plaguing it right now. And we might even see a little land breeze set up, so an offshore flow here by tomorrow morning, just because the wind will be so light. No big synoptic features to keep it really cranking off towards the east anymore, because the flow really is going to change to the south tomorrow. It's going to start off southeast, change to the south, and then by the end of the day, it'll be straight southwest there. So that'll go offshore. But we're going to have a lot of storms come from the west coast, push off towards the east coast, and that in turn is going to push those winds offshore too. But you probably have to get out of the water if you are in the water when those storms come through, because they could be pretty strong tomorrow and Tuesday too. So let's just go through time here real quick, and we'll go see how this thing just kind of unwinds itself and then lifts off. Now, the next interesting part, and this is only developed on this model run here, this is of the GFS 18Z. So you see this little low forming here, and right in this nook, we get a little fetch to form, and that is our nook. If anything forms in here, we usually get a nice swell, and it does get sent all the way down into South Florida too. When something develops here in the nook. Now, it's not all that strong. That yellow color there is 25, 30 knots, so not all that strong, but it's super close, so the decay won't get at it. Whereas if that was up here or something, that wave's probably not going to make it for that little of a fetch. But since it's super close by, it could form into something. Now, I wouldn't get too excited about this right now, because this is the first model run that this has popped up. What has happened in previous ones, we've had the low right here or along the Gulf Coast. It has pushed up in this direction, then shot off the coast, then kind of went south a little bit, developing a big, huge fetch pointing like that. Now, we still kind of have that going on. So let's go through these maps here and go through time. And you see that still happens right here. The main low is well to the south, about even with Hatteras, but you get this nice big fetch here pointed at us. You get high pressure to the north, kind of keeping this thing from going in this direction. It's going to nudge it down to the south instead, or at least keep it in place here, for a little bit, before finally it's going to start to move up towards the northeast. But enough of a little fetch forms right there, and it's a deep enough fetch too to send us a little swell. And in fact, this run looks really nice for us, because even though this thing starts to kind of curl up here, this is still, the main fetch is still pointed at us, and we'd still be getting swell. And this is Saturday afternoon. Finally, the swell cuts off Saturday afternoon. So from this distance away, Nova Scotia, and our swell cuts off on Saturday, that's about 3 days worth of swell between here and here that still need to get to us. So that would be Saturday, Sunday, Monday, So half of Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and probably half of Tuesday still before we get waves. Now, I wouldn't get too excited about that. The GFS is kind of notorious about making things a little bit stronger than what they'll actually be. And we'll take a look at the European here in a second, and you can see it'll be a lot weaker than this. But it still shows the same general thing right here, just not as strong. So it'll still send a swell, just maybe not as big as what the GFS is saying. Now, when this swell would hit, let's just go to this here, as it would be, if this would happen, let's say give it a couple days, it'd be Saturday morning before anything would get here. So for us, look at that, straight west wind, offshore wind, meeting this northeast swell that would be making it down. So that would be ideal for sure to have some of that happen. Now, again, don't get too excited, but I think the general pattern is going to allow this, and I think this is going to happen. The big question is going to be just how strong is it going to be? Is it going to be a big blown out thing with a large fetch, give us a good size wave, or is it just going to be a weak little low like the last one, where it's just going to give us kind of a small waist high wave? So we'll have to see about that. My guess, you know, it's gonna trend towards the weaker side, I think, because honestly, the one that's out there right now, this one, looked really nice a week out too, and look at how weak it became. Really, it wasn't all that strong, enough to send a little something, but it didn't really end up being all that strong. If this was bigger, this is in a great position to send a swell. It's right over Bermuda. The north side of it is a good fetch, so this just needed to be a lot stronger. The decay for that to get here, gone. So again, tomorrow, small, probably need a waist high still, especially up coast. I don't know how far it's going to make it into Palm Beach County now. Probably Jupiter, Juneau, and you know, maybe tapering off from there. Probably won't make it much farther down south. Let's look at the long range real quick. We'll go out in time here. And interesting note on this specific run, and honestly, it does show it on the European too, which is crazy. Check this out. This is October 5th. This right here is a bona fide cold front that makes it through South Florida on October 5th. Wouldn't that be great? Lowers the humidity a little bit, probably not the temperature all that much, but maybe a couple degrees. We'll see. This is the first time this has shown up and actually showed the cold front making it all the way through. Other runs have kept it way up here like the previous couple of cold fronts, so my thinking is that's probably going to happen. This is probably a little bit ambitious to get this front all the way down here, but don't worry, that's actually a good thing, because if we did get that pushing through right when that swell comes in on Sunday too, Saturday will be clean, but Sunday then blown out by northeast winds, so we don't really want that. That thing stalls up to the north and we get southwest winds out ahead of the front, golden for us for a couple of days, so that'll be nice. You know, this does kind of weaken and die off, not a lot of whole punch behind it, but again, that does make it through and dry us out briefly. Let's go through the long range. This right here, this is showing a big old blast cold front coming through too, with a big old nor'easter wind chop for us. I don't know about this strong, but the models have been consistent in after this next little ground swell, we're going to get some wind chop in here, and that's going to be towards like the end of the first week of October. Look for some wind chops. We'll have a little swell at the beginning of this week, possibly a little bit bigger by the end of the weekend, and then by the following time, like mid to late following week, that's when we'll see some wind chopping, and the pattern does show that this will probably happen with a big old high starting to move on in the east instead of that big trough that we've had in the east pretty consistently now for a little bit, and giving us kind of gnarly weather here the past week or so, and that's not going to let up this upcoming week, but possibly after that we'll start to see that little shift there with a high moving offshore, and we'll pump in some wind chop. Interestingly enough, for the umpteenth time, the GFS loves to throw a hurricane our way on the last panel. Look at that, Wilma style. So, not really to be believed here quite yet. This is way out in the extended forecast, but it possibly could be picking up on the fact that don't give up on hurricane season yet. There could be some shenanigans, especially down in this region, especially in the Gulf of Mexico too, especially when we get this high up here and we get a little trough here. So that kind of down to the southwest of that makes fun and games happen. So we'll have to see about that. So not totally out of the question, but you know, this is way out there. It's just something to laugh at right now, because never does this far out 384-hour forecast work out to be like that. But again, we look for trends. This is the first model run that's been in there. So anyways, let's go back to the European now, and we're going to see just how this kind of fares with what the GFS has said. Pretty even with our little system out there right now. It's weak. Again, we'll see maybe a little push tomorrow and then weakening on Tuesday. But look at this. Kind of interesting here too that this the European also shows this long fetch hugging the coast right here too, which could be good for us, sending some swell our way. It's not that strong. Remember I said the GFS a little bit stronger than the European, and that's exactly what we're seeing here, is this area in the Nook not that strong. But again, it's close to us, and anything in here that's close enough will send at least a little bit of swell. Even if it's just needle waist high, send a little bit of swell. But look what happens. Look what the European has. It's strengthening the low right here, really starting to strengthen and wind up. So let's we'll scroll through a couple more hours here. And the good part of this is, if I can get it to go here, come on. Instead of moving just straight north, it gives a little bit of time here of some fetch here, and you know, a little bit at least to give a little bit of swell. This isn't super duper strong, but you know, it's something. The difference with the European, it's much faster. This thing moves straight up. After it gets offshore, it moves up to Nova Scotia, and then that immediately cuts off on any swell generation there. So the GFS has a longer period or a longer time of swell headed our way, and the European maybe has a little pulse of a day or two, and that's it. So leaning a little bit towards the European just because it has been a little bit more accurate as of late, unfortunately, because it's not the better solution. But look at what it does show here. I'm going to go to the end here. This is 180 hour. So let's back it up a little bit. So what it does show, this thing sometimes, is, and this is great, it also shows a cold front making it all the way through on the same time, October 5th. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, even if we don't get much wave action from that, because look at the wind, not all that strong. Hey, if things dry out and a couple degrees less on the heat, I think we'll all be happy. Nice clear skies and no rain for once. That would be nice. All right, let's check the buoys now and see for tomorrow. This is for the immediate future, and here we go, 4 feet 8 seconds. I'm not overly impressed with that, and I've been watching these all weekend because I have off tomorrow and I want to go surfing. And I mean, it's kind of been fluctuating from 4 to 3.9, so it really hasn't built all that much. So I don't see much of an increase tomorrow. I know some of the models do want to bump it up tomorrow, so we have that possibility, but I'm just not overly enthused about that. There's still swell in the water, so I think once the chop is gone, then the swell will show a little bit more. So I think we're still going to get a needle waist high wave tomorrow, probably Jupiter northward. South of there, I'm not too optimistic about that. All right, this is the closer buoy. That was the 120. This is the closer buoy here off Canaveral, and you see it's 3 feet 8 seconds, 3.3, kind of fluctuating back and forth. out of the east-northeast. One thing I did pick up on is, if I can scroll up here, it's not on this one, but that it was turning a little bit more northeast. That would be the only thing that I would think maybe it would shove it down into South Florida a little bit more, but I don't know. I think that's just being very, very optimistic. So here's the Fort Pierce buoy. Fort Pierce buoy, 3 feet, 10 seconds, 10, 11 seconds, but it's been consistently that for a couple of days, so that's nothing to get excited about. And really, the swell height is less than a foot, but at 10 seconds, that does add up to maybe a waist-high wave. Tomorrow, probably Treasure Coast northward would be your best bet. That's where I'm going. So let's talk about the long-range forecast now, and let's talk about what we think the winter's going to be like. Now, we've been waiting for this El Nino to form. It still really hasn't officially formed, so now we'll have to see. I think the seasonal change will bring it on, but it'll be kind of a weak or at most moderate El Nino year. Aside from that, what we have in the forecast here, and I'll show you this, this is from NOAA. This is the 3-month outlook for, this one's the temperature outlook for January, February, March. And you can see what it shows below normal, temperature-wise, for South Florida, and below normal, you know, for all of the South. Now let's look at precipitation. Above normal. So we got above normal here, below normal in here. Now what this says to me is that for us, what's going to happen when you see this type of setup here, how you get above normal down here, we get a storm track that comes down like this and comes up here and then comes out to sea. That's good for us swell-wise. If we get all the storms to do this type of thing and then move out to sea, we're going to get some good swells this winter. And you see that it cuts off here at the Carolinas. So what that also tells me is, instead of riding up the coast like this, and us just maybe getting a possibility of a refraction swell, because you would see this would be all above normal if that would happen. But we're not seeing that. We're seeing it cut off right here. So this tells me that the storm track, this tells me that the storm track is going to be more like this, out to sea. And that is a really good storm track for us through the winter. If we can get storms to do this through the winter, once a week or so, we're going to have good swells at least once a week. Also down here, what this indicates is we have another little jet kind of feeding into this right here, and to this one coming down like this, and then swooping up, giving it an extra little boost for it to just blow up out here and make a big storm with a nice northeast fetch there. So I'm still thinking that, especially come January, that's when we're really going to see things start to kick in. I'm not going to exclude December. I think December will still be good. November, you know, November's a little bit iffy now, and but I think the true fashion of winter is going to come January, February, March, and even in April too. I don't have the map punched up here, but it's still showing this same setup that we're seeing like this. So it doesn't go away until like the summer. So if that's the case, we could even be looking at a bomb of a spring too, with things really getting exciting here and getting us some big swells out there. So that's what we got going on. Thanks for watching. I'll be out in the water somewhere tomorrow. Follow me on Instagram, Surfing Weatherman, Twitter, and Facebook. And I'll update the text here in just a minute. You have it all set for this week. I'm not going to update it again until I get back to work, which is Wednesday. All right, see you out in the water. Peace.